Hello SPED 2010 students. I hope everyone had a great week last week. So this week we're going to be diving into Module 3. Module 3 is really looking at the policies, the practices, and really what the process is when we're talking about inclusive education and what that looks like. So I want to start off here looking at our overview of what we want to accomplish in this module. So really, when we're talking about policies and process, we're thinking about an inclusive classroom where you are the general ed teacher and you have different roles and responsibilities. But here's the thing, we have to be able to meet the needs of all of our students. With that being said, that you're going to have to work alongside special education teachers and other teachers to make sure you meet those needs. So the other part is working and collaborating with the parents. So even if we try our very best, sometimes we're going to have students who struggle. So with that, we have to make sure that we are doing everything possible. With that, we're also looking at, the legislative component, which is what we've talked about the last couple of weeks, but we're really looking at IDEA legislation. We're looking at if we see a student struggling and we think there's something going on, as an educator, we want to make sure we are communicating that to the parents or guardians and making sure that we can get them tested and we get permission to get them tested for referral and assessment to see if they qualify for special ed services. So really, we're going to look at IEPs, individualized education plans. We're going to look at any kind of types of related services, and then also accommodations like Section 504. So really that's going to be our focus. We're also going to go back looking at universal design, which we talked a lot about last week, and really just looking at how we can support all of our students. So I have some keywords and concepts here that's really related to our chapter, but also our objectives and what we hope to accomplish. Now, with these keywords and concepts, a lot of these you're going to see in your textbook. So please make sure that you're familiar with them and you know what they mean, because it's going to help you make connections to the text and the resources that I give you in this module. Okay, so looking at the standards, as I mentioned before in the last module, is we have our INTAS teacher professional standards and we have our standards for the Council for Exceptional Children. So looking here, you're going to be seeing both sets of standards and what we will be covering, what standards will be covered in this module. Now, the reading resources I've offered you is I have given you the Chapter 3 outline because you're going to be reading from the text, Chapter 3 in our book. And I did have a question, and I wanted to note that I had sent an email last week, or this past week, excuse me, about the textbook. Now, the textbook was under student help and it was named Red Shelf Materials. It has now been changed to Brightwave. So it's still the same section. You're just going to click on Brightwave because they renamed it. So your textbook will be located under there. But you will be reading from 3 different things this week as part of your resources. So the first thing you're going to do is read Chapter 3 in the textbook. I also want you to read from the textbook, A Teacher's Guide to Special Education. There's a link here. It is a PDF, so you don't have to purchase it. So this is extra resources for you to make connections to our text in Chapter 3. And then you're going to be reading a section from this Tennessee Special Education Framework, and you're only going to be reading Component 1, 2, and then all of Component 2. And this is really going to walk you through IEPs, IDEA, and related services, and how this is connected when we're trying to make sure we're meeting the needs and what we need to do to support them so we can create goals and IEPs. And even if they don't, what related services or accommodations can we make for those students? I do have your Chapter 3 PowerPoint. It goes directly with Chapter 3 in our textbook. So just make sure that you download and save those and keep it, because that's also a good study tool for our quizzes and exam. I have provided you the outline. The outlines are connected specifically to the textbook, as well as the PowerPoint slides, and you'll see there where the connections are made. Okay, I did also provide you with a Nearpod presentation. This is really going a little bit further and in depth when we're talking about IEPs and modifications related services. So you can join by either clicking on this, or you can join at join.nearpod.com and then go ahead and enter the code. I did double check it. It should take you to the correct presentation. The next thing I gave you is a video, a short video, really walking you through what is the process when you're in an IEP team meeting, or you're part of an IEP team. What does that look like, and what is the process? So I want you to watch that. Okay, if you're not a visual learner or audio learner, I did go ahead and just put the transcript here. So that is available for you if you decide you didn't want to watch it, but you're able to read this. So that's available, so you can choose which one best fits your learning needs. Now, I did put a resource on here that I thought was good, because when we're talking about IEPs, we really need to talk about what we call SMART goals. So SMART goals really stand for, are the goals that we're making for the children based on where we want them to be. Obviously, we look at the state standards for Tennessee, but we're looking at the goals we're setting for them to be specific. We can measure them. The student can actually attain and achieve them. They have to be what we call results oriented. We're gathering that data, and then there's a specific timeline, or it's time bound. And that's really going to help you when a child has received special ed services after they're evaluated, and you're on that IEP team, and you sit down and you start making those goals. This is really something to be in the back of your mind. Are these SMART? And this is really neat because it gives you a table that really talks about what does it mean. It gives you examples of what a IEP goal would be if it wasn't SMART. And then it gives you an example of an actual SMART IEP goal. And it breaks it down into the acronym: specific, measurable, attainable. So this is really giving you an idea of what we're talking about when we say SMART goals. And there's also some questions on here that's kind of like a resource. If you're thinking about wanting to support parents in that process. And then it talks about the key takeaways from this resource. So this is really good to kind of keep that as part of a connection to the content that we're talking about. I also have a PowerPoint here for RTI and how it's related to how we can use RTI when we're talking about evaluations and eligibility for special education services, right? And what's the process look like, and how do we use our data from RTI to support students? What are the different tiers and interventions? So that presentation is really useful to give you a deeper in-depth look when we're talking about testing the child to see if they can get related services, or even if we can make sure they get special ed services or accommodations. Okay, there's the citations that I gave you. Also, I wanted to draw your attention to this because I had a few questions. Under each module in their reading and resources section, at the bottom of that section, there is always going to be a section for a discussion board called Questions About the Course. If you ever have questions about this specific module, you can email me or you can ask it here, and then I can respond. But keep in mind, I usually check these every 2 to 3 days. So if it's a pressing question, I would just reach out directly, email, because I do read those every day. But that's also a great resource, because sometimes if I don't get to respond in time, another student might respond for you, and that will answer your question. Now, looking at what you're going to be assessed on this week, how are you going to be graded? I gave you all of these great resources. You're reading from Chapter 3. There's a lot of great material in there, but I want you to dive a step further, and I really want you to get feedback and understanding with what you're learning, because this is very important as an educator, even if you're not specifically going into special education. So I provided you with something called the IRIS modules. Now, there was a section in here in the first week of school, the Read This first section called Getting Started, and I described what an IRIS module was. So I want you to think of it kind of like professional development for you, if you will. So when you click on the IRIS module, okay, it's going to take you to what we call the professional development. You click on it, and there's note sheets underneath each one. And what this allows you to do is it really allows you to go through and learn deeper, kind of a way for you to see videos, audio clips, professionals talking. This one's specifically tailored to how would you develop a high quality individualized education program. So what would be an IEP? What would that process look like? And what's included in that document? Again, going back to the SMART goals, and you're going to see that in this professional development called IRIS module. Now, as you walk through and go through this, you would just click the next button, and that's how you get through the pages. But you'll see here that you'll just click through, you'll scroll down, there may be special links, there's clips, there's audio and transcripts, there's tables included. It's really a great resource. And on the left side of these IRIS modules that you go through, you can click through that as well, and this is called the table of contents. So if you didn't want to click through the next and back, you can just click on the sections that you need for this specific module. So you'll see this first section is really about what is an IEP, and they cover that. The next one is talking about the IEP process. The third section in the module is talking about what is actually included in IEPs for students. And then you also have like resources and wrap up. Now, something I want to draw your attention to is when you're completing this IRIS module, I always encourage students to do the assessment. Sometimes I may have you turn the assessment into me, right? And that's going to be how I grade you. Other times I'm going to have you use this as feedback, which is a really great idea for you to see how much you've learned through this module and how it's connected to your content in the course and what's your deep understanding of it. Now, sometimes these assessments are really great because they're almost like case studies, if you will. They're going to give you children, and it's going to talk to you about maybe issues that they're having. Maybe they have an IEP and how you can support them. So this one is really neat. I want you to work on that. You're not going to turn this in, but I do want you to go through and try to see if you can answer some of these. And what it's wanting you to do is, first it wants you to explain what an IEP is and its purpose it serves in the classroom. Then it wants you to explain the difference between like the procedure requirements and then what would be what we call substantive requirements. And this is going to be under the section where it talks about the process of what it is. Now, the third section is really you start getting into that case study, if you will. This is Bella, 7th grader, and she has a learning disability. So she receives special ed services. She's qualifies for it. So we're creating her an IEP document. So within the IEP document, you have something called a PLAAFP statement, right? So what you're going to do is, this is the statement that we have, okay? It says, this is not an example of a high-quality PLAAFP statement. Identify the elements that are missing, okay? So there's something wrong with this statement, and we're going to try to tweak it and make it better, right? So it's not complete. It's not what we want it to be. So based on this, okay, we're going to have to figure out what we would want a goal for Bella to be. Now, this is her annual goal, and this is what it gives you, right? And we're going to see if all the elements that's supposed to be in the IEP for the goals are there. You know, what's missing? What could we add? Is it actually a SMART goal? And kind of elaborate on that, how it is, if you think it is, or if it's not, why. And then if it's going to meet her needs for reading, right? And then it also has a couple other questions here. Really, when we're talking about goals, we have to gather data, right? So we can see if we're meeting those goals. So if we were going to monitor Bella, right, to make sure she's meeting her goals, what would that process look like, and how would we, right, report that progress to the parents? So this is a really neat activity. I feel like you can get a lot out of it, so I want you to do that. Now, there's a second part to an IRS module, and this one is really talking all about what is included in the IEP document. So it goes a step further. The other one did talk about it, but it was just like an overview, but this is really going to dive further into it, right? So talking about those IEP statements, those PLA AFP statements, what does that stand for? So here's what I was thinking. Why don't you do both modules and then go back and revisit Bella and then create that for Bella? And what I'm going to do is I am going to ask you maybe the next week, so you'll have all week to work on this, because it is a lot to think about for Bella and to go through these modules. But remember, this is how you're being assessed this week, so this is your focus in addition to your Module 3 quiz. But I will be asking for that, and I want to see what we came up with, right? And I'm going to use this as extra points, right, for our quiz for Module 3. So that's going to be, even if you score high, because remember, you get to take the quiz as much. Those extra points in your overall average is really going to help you. Okay, so you can get an extra 5 bonus points, and that's going to help you for your overall average grade. So if you ace it because you decided to take Module 3 quiz multiple times, you'll get 105, and that's going to go into your overall grade, and that can help you on the midterm. So I just want you to be thinking about that. So it's a win-win for you because you're getting that feedback and really diving into a case study in this IRIS module. So I would suggest going through both of them before I work on Bella. And what I would do with Bella when you are in the assessment component, I would just kind of copy it and I would paste it inside of a Word document. You don't have to paste a picture of Bella because you'll have to save the image. It probably won't save it. But I would just copy the questions, right? And then put that on a Word document because that way it'll be easier to submit to me in email when I ask for them. So going back to the second module part that you're going to do, and this is one whole module, but it's broken up into 2 parts, part 1 and 2, because it was so big. There's a lot that goes into when we're talking about evaluations and eligibility as well as IEPs. So that's why it's broken into 2 parts. So when we're talking about PLAAFP, which is going to be in the case study Bella, it stands for present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. We have to know what those statements mean, right? So we're looking at the student's ability. So not only academically, but also like those functional skills. Okay, so that's what that stands for, and that's really the statement that you're gonna see with Bella. Then it talks about the goals, and so there's different sections and components of the IEP that you're gonna be going through. Now, this would help you too, working with Bella, is thinking about how do you actually make a high quality statement and what are the components it must have, right? Based on, the student's needs. We're looking at the effects of progress in the general education classroom. We have that data we collect, and where's that baseline at that we're looking for. And we're also looking at, when we start looking at that statement and we put those goals in there, there has to be some kind of bridge between what our statement is and then looking at that annual goal for Bella, for her reading. So really, what's the connection there and what would that look like? Then it talks about the next section, the IEP process and what are those procedural requirements. And then it goes even further in depth, talking about what components are you going to actually see in that IEP document, which is very useful for you, I feel like. Now, this one does have an assessment. You'll see it's the same here as what was in the first part because I said it's going together. We just had to break it up. So you'll see it again. Now, what you are going to complete for a grade, right, is going to be what we call the IEP note sheet. So this is just going to be a document that opens up. You'll download it, and then you're going to look at it, and you're going to use it as a study guide, because you'll notice here I have two note sheets, right, for part 1 and for part 2. You're going to only be submitting the part 2, but you still need to complete the part 1 because I feel like it's a very good study tool. And it can help you to answer the assessment with Bella as well. So I'm only grading you on the second note sheet, but if you want to complete the first and send it to me, that's fine, but I'm not requiring it. I am requiring you to complete the second part though. So you'll just click on it, it'll go to your downloads, and then you'll click on that, and then you should be able to type in the document. Always make sure that you download it and save it, because I've had some issues where people have lost it. Okay, and remember, all of this information is really coming from that IRIS module, and I even help you out by telling you what pages to kind of be looking at. Okay, now the first one I said you didn't have to turn in, but I will show you here kind of what it looks like. Okay, and you'll see here, it kind of walks you through as well as pages too. And this is really good for you to make connections, right, to what you're reading about and any resources I give you. And I feel like if you have base knowledge and an understanding of the IEP process and how you create IEPs, then I feel like it's going to help you moving forward. Because remember, this is something you're going to have to know as an educator. So even though you're not turning this part in, unless you just want to, it's a good idea for you to do it. It gives you some feedback. So that's the IRIS module. And then again, like I mentioned, you will have your module 3 quiz. Now, something that I want to talk about is service learning. I hope at this point you have already turned in your application. You have submitted your service release hold harmless sheet. You have submitted your BECHS waiver. You have already purchased your liability insurance, and you've taken care of your background check. Now, if you'll see here, what's due this week is your service learning proof of liability insurance. Okay, now you did have 2 options. You could do the NEA as a STA student, or you could purchase the AON through the Water States Cashier's Office for $13. It was up to you as far as which one you wanted to purchase. That proof where you purchased it needs to be in Teams, so submit it to Teams. I also had a question about the background check. If you had a background check, a TBI background check done for a school system, maybe you are employed by a school system, whether it's a sub or a teaching assistant, maybe ESP program, whatever it is, if you were employed by a school and you had a background check, I sent out what we call an employer verification form. Here's something I want to note. If that background is older than 2 years, it will not be accepted. So when you're submitting that employer verification form, if you're, let's say that you've worked for them for 5 years, and you had your background check done 5 years ago, that will not count because it's not current. Current means it has to be done and completed within the last 2 years. So you're going to have to do another background check. So just keep that in mind, because I've had some questions about that. All right, guys, that pretty much takes care of Module 3. If you need anything, please feel free to reach out, and I guess I will see you in the next video. Take care, guys.